Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here and share our story with you. This morning, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of how we've got to where we have over the sort of it's since 2013 when I first started talking to TCM Group. So it's been quite a journey. And there we go. So a little bit about the background, and clicker's not as quick as I am. So in 2013, we as a company decided to start looking at all of our policies. And the first policy that we were reviewing was the bullying and harassment policy. The whole ethos around our B&H policy had been very much that, it was looking at investigation. It was very much get everybody going through a very formal process. So it was part of our start of a cultural change. We knew this was just the seed. We had to go through all of our policies, but we thought bullying and harassment, we knew how big it was, what we wanted to do. So we engaged with our unions first. Now we have two unions, Unite and CWU. So we engaged with both unions and talked to them. We actually took them to TCM Group and showed them what you're going to see this afternoon. We showed our unions that so that we all knew we were on the same page. They bought into this process very well. TCM Group were part of a bidding process, and there were 6 other competitors. We obviously at that time were still government owned, so we went through a massive procurement ordeal really. TCM came out, well, not just on top, they came out cantering to the winning post. And it sealed the relationship we had with TCM, to be perfectly honest. We are not like some of the organisations that we talked about earlier, where it's a smaller company where you can just put your arms around it. Royal Mail Group is a tanker, and to slightly turn is just horrendous. So, 150,000 employees. So this is a massive, massive ordeal for us. So we really needed to partner properly with our unions and with the mediation company that we partnered with, which ended up being TCM. So we started with our B&H policy. We embedded mediation, so the informal process, into our policy, which was a great help. We thought about what we're going to do. Are we going to recruit our own mediators? Will they be part-time? Will they be full-time? For the B&H, what we decided to do was to outsource to TCM. So we worked in partnership. So anybody going through the B&H process knew that they could go through mediation, and that it was an external company that was going to supply that. So that was going on over here. Over here, we were working extremely closely with the view that in a year's time, we would then bring in our own mediation team, and we wanted to work out how that would work, what it looked like, who we wanted to recruit, etc. As ever, the complications within Royal Mail. At the same time, we then worked with our CWU union, and we put together a new agreement, which is just on the bottom here, Agenda for Growth. This was a groundbreaking agreement, and one of the main things was to look at the industrial relations framework. So all of how we deal with disagreements within our company, where it's a union and management disagreement. So of course mediation would spring to mind. So we then decided to continue with our B&H being managed by TCM. And on the other side, we started to design our mediation internal team, who were going to work basically to start with on the industrial relations framework disagreements, with a view that as we moved on and we brought it in-house, they would then take the B&H mediations on board, with a view to then change the grievance policy and start to use them within the grievance policy. Just so, because I won't mention grievance much again, that is starting as we speak now. We're looking at the grievance policy. We're redesigning it with the unions, and mediation is a very big part of that. But this is more about what's happened so far. So how did we do this? So I'm going to talk about, because I've had a few people talk to me about how did you get the mediation team, what happened. Well, basically through the agreement we decided that we looked at the volumes that we thought were going to come through, and we decided we were going to have a full-time mediation team, and we needed 10 people. Now, why did we need 10 people? About 10 people, we think, we don't know. It seems to make sense. There were a few constraints we had. Because we had got such a good working relationship with the union, and they were very, very bought into this, it was decided that we would have 5...
It's a test, yes.
It's a test. And the exits...
I'm not panicking.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, what we decided through the agreement was that we'd introduce mediation. We'd have 5 union representatives who became mediators and 5 management representatives that would become mediators. So we went through a massive campaign. So I sat down with TCM. We looked at what are the qualities that you need to be a mediator. So not a manager, not a union rep. What do we want? So basically, David, when you recruit your people, what do you look for? So we put our own personality assessment together. We put competency-based interviews, and we put an advert out. So we had over 500 people apply for 10 jobs. So then I started to panic a little bit, and we looked at how on earth we were going to go about this. So we went through a stringent recruitment process. We did some competency-based questions with the application. We took into account the personality assessments, and then we shortlisted down and then did interviews, and then appointed to those posts. So I've now got 5 union reps. I've got 5 managers of differing levels who are all now working in a team, and they actually work in pairs. So somebody asked a question earlier about, how do you keep that kind of balance? Well, actually, that was exactly why we did both. So for the IR issues, we put 2 mediators in. They are called mediators. We don't know whether they don't tell anybody whether they're a union rep or a manager. Everybody wants to guess, and at the end we usually find they're going, so are you the manager? Are you the rep? But it's worked really well, and that actually keeps that equilibrium, especially in the IR situation. In the B&H, which we've just taken on board this last month, we only send 1 mediator in, and it could be a ex-union rep, ex-manager. So that's a little bit how we went about that. Now, we were all very excited, and the union was very excited. However, the rest of the business didn't really know what was going on. So the first thing we did was train our mediators. So we got them all accredited through TCM, which went really well. They got the peer feedback. We also spoke to David, and we decided that actually we hadn't got anybody with the skills to manage this. We've got 10 mediators sat in our business. We've just basically set up a mediation company within Royal Mail. So we then seconded one of David's, I think, top employees into the business to work with us for 2 years. So Thomas joined us. He set up the team. He's run the team. He runs our triage calls for us. He manages the mediators within that and does all of the ongoing learning, etc. And he's done an absolutely fabulous job. And what the benefits from that have been that he's still working for TCM, so he still touches with them. So we get the updates of what's going on in mediation, what's changing, what's new. We're using Thomas now as we go into the negotiations of our grievance procedure. Thomas is coming in as the expert to sit with the unions and talk through, the benefits of mediation within a grievance policy. So we are all set up and we're very happy. I've got 150,000 people out there who know nothing about mediation. If they do know about it, they really don't know what it is. They just think they do. You have people out there who are also very much, we're not letting them into us. We'll just keep it here, eh? We'll just keep that problem local. So we realised we needed to market this business. We needed to make sure everybody knew what it was. So we put a communication strategy together. And of course, it wasn't really that much of an issue because we weren't getting any mediations at this point. You know, nobody really knew what was going on. So the role for the first few months, 2 to 3 months, was absolutely about, we're going to re-educate the business. You've seen it in the new policy, and we've been doing some mediations over here, but very small amounts for this large business. So we went out and communicated. We dealt with branding ourselves. We dealt with all of our referral documentation. We got buy-in from the business. Does this work for you? Is this a little bit over the top? How are we working? So there was a lot of work done, a lot of travelling. And I think we actually saw in the first 3 months 2,371 people and told this story to. And this went from HR right through frontline staff, so postmen and women, who probably at this stage wouldn't get involved in mediation, but if they have an issue, they were pushing it up with the knowledge of what that was. So in comparison to 150,000 people, that doesn't look like a very large percentage. That's why we didn't put the percentage down. However, for 10 people working in pairs, because one doesn't go without the other, so 5 people getting around a national company and getting airspace, that was actually pretty significant. We also have operational conferences. We were getting airtime by our directors. We were getting buy-in from the top level to actually start mentioning mediation, etc. That was part of our communication strategy, just really to get people to understand it was the new buzzword. And then we would follow up with, right, here's the substance to it. So, mediation products and services. So we started off and we just did one-on-one mediations. So in the IR sphere, it was a rep and a manager. So I know there's some organisations here who are unionised. So that could be at local level, local rep and delivery office manager who just cannot sort their problem out because they really actually just don't get on to start with and haven't probably spoken in 20 years and have managed to work together for 20 years. So we were dealing with that. What we started to look at, and actually started people were coming to us, and at first the union, if I'm honest, were coming to us and saying, actually, we've got a real problem in this whole branch, so in a whole geographical area, actually, the area reps don't get on with the local reps or the divisional reps, and the managers don't get on, and we don't even know who the director is. So we started doing some of the group facilitated workshops, where we got really, really good results from that, where we actually started to get them all talking to one another. We did listening sessions, so where we have maybe engagement problems in a particular unit, might have 100, 200 people work in that unit, and the people needed a voice. They didn't want to sit down. HR, for starters, it's just not their role and they don't have time. But the management, they didn't want to talk to the management about it. So our guys were seen as independent. There was no bias. So our guys would go in, do the listening sessions. Not the key here was the balance of not do anything with it and make it very clear they were there purely to take the information and let the management and the reps deal with it together, because we wanted to keep that independence. But we've done quite a lot of the listening sessions. And then we have supporting mediation program. So I think I've got some slides moving on. Yeah. So I'll come on to the supporting mediation because it's our next step and what we've found is working for us. Just on here, a lot of people won't understand any of this. This is very raw mail speak, but I think what I was trying to illustrate is we're dealing with all sorts, you know, and relationships come in there. SI meetings is relationships between unions and managers, but there's a lot of these things are actually operational productivity issues. So this is where we're trying to change units and make them more productive, more commercial, work to budget, etc. These are all issues that enable the business to actually have an end result that is more commercial and better focused for the business. So whereas sometimes mediation can look as the fluffy stuff, you know, relationships, actually this is all hard cash that it actually changes. We've done mediation referrals. So this is since September last year. I'm just looking over there. I believe it's from September last year. 164. We've had 124 mediations completed. 40 cancelled. Now, this for us is quite an issue, and this is where they start the process. A lot of the cancellations come from B&H, where they're bought into it to start with, and then maybe decide as it gets closer to the day that they're not going to take that up, and they then can go into the process, which is more formal. And that's something we're concentrating on as to why have we got those cancellations. We've done 8 of the mediation workshops and 7 of the listening sessions. So the number of people that have gone through it, so those were the actual, we've had 248 people go through the mediation process within the business. And we see those as actually 248 people who are now spreading the word on how good it is and are coming back to us with other referrals and other situations. So that's great. The listening sessions, again, another 241, and the group workshops 59. So the follow-up calls, I think you mentioned yours, we're pretty much the same. We have the 1, 3, 6 and 12. So that's where we're looking at with our sort of callbacks. But we had found that you get to a point and it maybe starts getting a little bit sticky. So we've done really well and we're all best mates and we're working really well, and then pressure comes on board a little bit. And you start getting a little bit of the old habits coming back of maybe how they've been communicating. And we were seeing this. And what we were doing was then highlighting this when the wheels were about to come off. We were highlighting it all a little bit too late, really. So we sat down and went, actually, that we need to improve this. We need this process improved. So what we're looking at now is once we have got an agreement, we then take the manager above and the rep that works above it, if it's an IR situation. And we actually then do a half-day training course with them, which gives them a real insight into what mediation is. It helps them to understand what the people have gone to. And by the end of the day, what they actually then do is they come together and put an action plan and agree a plan together on how they're going to support the 2 people that have gone through mediation. Now, because it's industrial relations side of things, it's not confidential. Now, on the B&H side of things, where it is confidential, we're looking at how we're going to do that, because we still think there's going to need to be some support, but we just need to have a look at how that is. In your industrial relations side, so your issues that are not confidential, this is something that we're just starting to do. We've trialled it and it's been absolutely taken on with open arms. Because the key is, yes, mediation, it's dealt with in one day, it's great, it improves everything. But this is an ongoing, long-term relationship they've got to build up. And if they don't get the support, then it will come off the rails. So this is that's kind of the next step that we've put in. And that's just a little bit of information. It's 2 hours, and then the final 1.5 hours, as I say, they get their agreement. What's really good about this is actually where I said we've 258 people have been through the one-to-one process, you're actually extending this. So although their managers haven't been through a mediation, they've got a much better understanding of it. We're also opening that up to anybody close by in neighbouring offices who want to join, because it's all great life skills that we're teaching them in this. They're more than welcome. So we're finding a way of actually going out and educating more people, but by supporting the people who really were there and needed it. So I mentioned a little bit earlier, these are all different things that we have been doing to market the mediation. When we started with B&H, we did a very soft launch. We kept it very quiet because we just wanted to see how it would work. We wanted to learn from it. This year, we're like, right, come on, we're really going to launch it. We've been to, obviously, our conferences, CWU annual conference. Now, this is all of the reps from around the country. So you're probably looking, there's probably about 3,000 reps go, because it's not just Royal Mail, it's BT as well, Virgin Media, etc. It is unusual for management to get up and talk at the conference, as you can imagine. It's not really the ideal place. But last year, myself, one of the mediators, and at the time Dave Ward, who was the Deputy General Secretary for the CWU at the time, he's now the General Secretary, the three of us stood up on the stage and we talked and addressed the union and took questions. So for me, that was the absolute ultimate commitment from the union, absolute ultimate. And I believe that has actually strengthened exactly where we stand today within mediation within the business. And that's all I've done on the slides. But I'm happy to, I think can I do questions or later? Or
Feel free to take 5 minutes.
Sorry, can I ask, I'm really interested in the IR perspective.
Yeah.
It seems quite different. Is that about interpersonal relationships between, TV reps and managers, or is it about actually I'm just trying to understand where negotiation, consultation, and mediation all
fits in together. Yeah, and that's why the triage process is hugely important. So usually the mediation, they come along with, it can be with an issue that is a business related issue. We're not there to negotiate, but we are there to give them the space to be able to talk about it. But 9 times out of 10, the relationship is the issue. So although it is a business issue, the fact that they can't talk and they don't get on actually is what really is the underneath crux of the matter. Once you release that, then in that mediation they start to talk about what their issue is and what their business issue is. But they find a different way of communicating that and talking it through.
But that bit isn't confidential, that bit is confidential.
It's not confidential. Within our IR, the only time that it is confidential, they decide if they want something confidential, and it can only be about their personal relationship that they can keep confidential. And the reason for that is if it's an industrial relations decision that's going to be made out of it, it has to go for ratification. So it's open to the whole audience anyway. But if you and I were having that discussion and actually there was a whole part of the mediation which was the way you treated me when I came into the room or when I walked in on a morning or however that was, that bit can be kept confidential if they want it to be.
I've got one final question, so hold on. So you've only got 2 TUs, we've got multiple trade unions, so how you link them together, but what if the issue is covering, so they're quite happy the TU person links with manager to, if it's about business issue, for them to talk about that issue and not have the other TU rep involved?
Well, then you would have to look at if there was more than one TU that was going to be involved in that, then you would bring them in. Right. But of course, in those situations, we might look at, when Thomas does the triage, we would look at it and actually really get to the bottom. I mean, Thomas really finds out what is the issue. So there might be 4 TUs involved, but actually the real crux of it is with one relationship. So we might do mediation there first, then go back in and do the next mediation. So it can be quite layered until we start sorting individual problems out and then put them in together.
One of the innovations I think in Royal Mail is the joint referral by the union and management into mediation. Is it worth saying a few words about it? I think it really is a very important stage in development.
Yeah, how you get into the mediation process within Royal Mail is if I have a local rep and a local manager who have an issue, they have to go to the head of IR, who is within the HR team, and their divisional rep. And those 2 people have to jointly refer it. So actually there's an opportunity there to do a bit of sorting it out before it even comes into mediation. They have to agree that this is something that would work for mediation. They then own it and put it forward to Thomas, who then holds the triage calls and assesses, is this right? He amazingly finds out stuff that was never even on the script. And then we find out there's somebody over here that actually is the one that we need to pull in, and we pull it all together. But they then manage that all the way through. So we've got someone from the union and from the Royal Mail side of things who refer, manage it, and then they're the ones that we bring in with a line manager to actually then do the training afterwards.
Yep. Sarah Messenger from the Local Government Association. I'm really interested in this bit about what you called the money list, all the things that could save you money. But just to be clear, those where you think that the benefit of mediation is that on some of those things, presumably it's about an interpretation of what's the right way to apply them, rather than a desire to change the amount of annual leave you get or the amount you get paid for working weekends, because that will surely have to sit in the collective bargaining process. So this is where there's a difference of opinion about interpretation, and you're saying it's cheaper and easier to sort it out through mediation locally than end up with it all going through some convoluted process.
Absolutely. It could be. You're absolutely right. There are some rules around the IR mediation, and they are you cannot change or agree any national agreements. So, for example, there with your holidays, no, you can't let them go in the room and have a little discussion and decide we'll give everybody 40 days holiday in this unit, which I'm sure they'd love. But there are things. It is a little bit around interpretation, but most of the time they just get to a block. So we have an absolute process. I mean, it's, Royal Mail, one of the things we're very good at is process. We have very lengthy, good processes. So there is an absolute process to follow, but we just get to a point where they just start doing this and they've stopped listening. They've stopped coming with ideas now. They could be meeting daily, union rep and manager, and it's like this all the time. So then we go in to look at that as a mediation and just start to, on block, get the relationship sorted out. And then you see them starting to open up and starting to talk.
Jane, hi. I know we spoke before, but I'm just interested, given now you're ramping your comms strategy up significantly from where you were last year, what are your thoughts on the forecasting around whether the 10 remain the right number?
We think at the moment that they still are. When I do the business case, which they'll probably all be sat there going, yeah, we're working like mad, Jane. When I worked originally with David on this, we believe that each mediator can mediate for 2.5 days a week. So, and bear in mind our team, they're released, they're on secondment and they're full time. I'm not so sure that's the case now, because of the travelling and the distances that they cover, and we just don't seem to get a mediation in Birmingham. We get it, halfway up the Welsh mountains. So there's a little bit that's maybe not right. Because we're moving to one mediator with the B&H, that is helping. But at the moment, the 10, I think the capacity, I think for capacity we could do nearly 200 mediations before we start to wobble, is where I think we're at. But going to one mediator does help. And we think we might get there with the IR mediations in a little while, but we have to, you know, the biggie was this, making sure that everybody saw it as fair, but we seem to have now got a really good reputation as a team that we are seen as, you know, that we can start to move people along to, it's just a mediator.
Time for a couple more, Jan. Okay. A lot of questions.
So, once Thomas, you said you secured him for 2 years.
Yeah.
Once he goes, who will supervise your mediator if your mediators get rules, or just is, you know, they need to speak to someone about mediation?
Absolutely. I mean, what we will do is we will look to put in a mediation manager again, and you know that will be somebody that is homegrown into that role, that has the experience. One of the key things that we have found is we will continue using TCM. So TCM we still work with, even though we've brought it in-house. Work with TCM, they're our backup. So if all of a sudden we have an absolute surge and we can't manage, we ring TCM and get their mediators in. But also using refresher training, and from the training we know that we've got some links with other companies now so that they can talk to one another, so if they do come up against the brick wall. But the manager should be able to do that.
Can I ask, I know we probably have more time, but is it possible just in a sentence to encapsulate the impact and the benefit that this has had within Royal Mail?
It's been absolutely massive. I mean, it really has been the change of the culture within the business. And as I said at the beginning, we are a tanker. You know, so just changing a policy for us is, you know, it's a start and it's great. But I mean, you know, people are still referring to policies that we had 10 years ago. You know, things take time to change. This has actually arrived. It's been embraced by the union. It's been embraced by the business. And actually, it is on everybody's lips. It's the first thing. If they start to see something coming up with conflict, it's like, well, let's use mediation. Can we not use mediation? So it has changed the culture massively and the way people are starting to think.
Thank you.
I think can you give a rough estimate of how long it takes between referral and resolution? Very rough.
Thomas, how long does it take us? What's our SLA?
I think it kind of varies actually. 7 days SLA to bring it.
Yeah. Our SLA is 7 days, 7 working days. So from the minute they put the forms through, we're very clear on this. Once the forms arrive, we then have 7 days to put in a mediator. Sometimes though, it can be 48 hours. We've got a mediator in. Sometimes it can be 8 weeks. And they're still deciding whether it's right, wrong, but we just keep going. But it's about 2 weeks is probably our average for getting it from absolute start to mediated.
To put that in context, a rough grievance procedure with us takes about 6 months.
Yeah, and my B&H, because that's why I did the figures on, we were very similar. So 6 months of everybody going through pure hell. Yeah.
And it's really interesting, Brian Scott from the Unite Union,
yes.
the Ops and Mods conference, stood up and said, absolutely, no one benefits from those 6 months of hell. It tears the heart out of the team. I thought it was really interesting to hear the union so clearly express the damage they've done, because everyone's so fast to suspend or investigate and just investigate and hope that it's this mirage of some sort of an outcome, and it's a mirage, it doesn't exist. In fact,
absolutely, it's across the board. It's across the board.